A pregnant woman abandoned by her boyfriend... Then she gave a ride to an injured man. The rhythmic clanking of metal echoed through the Detroit garage as Sarah Thompson's nimble fingers worked their magic on a stubborn engine. Grease smudged her furrowed brow, determination etched in every line of her face. But across town, in a sleek high-rise office, Ethan Calloway stared at his computer screen, his stomach churning as he uncovered yet another financial discrepancy in his family's automotive empire. Two worlds, seemingly worlds apart, were about to collide in ways neither could have imagined. As Sarah tightened the final bolt, and Ethan saved the damning spreadsheet, fate was already setting its gears in motion, ready to propel them into a whirlwind of danger, deceit, and unexpected love. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Sarah Thompson's life had been a testament to resilience from the very beginning. Born into a family plagued by addiction and poverty in the outskirts of Detroit, her childhood was a constant struggle for survival. Her parents, both caught in the throes of drug dependence, were more shadows than nurturers in her life. The small, dilapidated house they called home was a battlefield of empty bottles, discarded needles, and broken promises. From a young age, Sarah learned to fend for herself. She scavenged for food when the refrigerator was empty, which was more often than not. She taught herself to mend her clothes when they tore, and to bandage her own scrapes and bruises. The local library became her sanctuary, a place where she could escape the chaos of her home life and dream of a better future. It was during one of her library visits that Sarah stumbled upon a book about cars. The intricate diagrams and explanations of how engines worked fascinated her. She began spending hours poring over automotive manuals, memorizing parts and systems. In the rusty old car abandoned in their backyard, Sarah found her first project. With nothing but determination and salvaged tools, she set about bringing the engine back to life. The day the engine sputtered and roared to life was the day Sarah discovered her calling. The sense of accomplishment, the thrill of solving a mechanical puzzle, ignited a passion that would shape the course of her life. She threw herself into learning everything she could about cars, spending her free time at local garages, observing and asking questions. High school was a blur of part-time jobs and night classes. Sarah worked tirelessly, saving every penny she could. Her dream of becoming a certified mechanic drove her forward, even as her home life continued to crumble around her. The day she graduated and landed an apprenticeship at a respected local garage was the day she finally broke free from her past, moving out of her parents' house and into a tiny apartment of her own. Years of hard work and dedication followed. Sarah's natural talent, combined with her unwavering work ethic, quickly made her stand out in the male-dominated world of auto mechanics. She faced skepticism and prejudice with quiet determination, letting her skills speak for themselves. By the age of 27, she had earned a reputation as one of the most skilled mechanics in Detroit, capable of diagnosing and fixing problems that stumped even her more experienced colleagues. Yet, for all her professional success, Sarah's personal life remained a work in progress. The scars of her childhood left her wary of close relationships, always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Trust didn't come easily to someone who had learned early on that even those who were supposed to love you unconditionally could let you down. Across town, in a world that couldn't have been more different from Sarah's, Ethan Calloway was fighting battles of his own. Born into the wealthy Calloway family, heirs to the Calloway automotive empire, Ethan's life seemed charmed from the outside. The reality, however, was far more complex. Ethan's earliest memories were of a warm, loving home centered around his mother's radiant presence. Elizabeth Calloway was the heart of the family, her laughter echoing through the halls of their sprawling mansion, her love a constant, reassuring presence in Ethan's life. But all that changed on a rainy night when Ethan was just 7 years old. The news of the car accident that claimed Elizabeth's life shattered the Calloway family. Ethan's father, Robert, retreated into his work, burying his grief in spreadsheets and board meetings. The once warm home became a mausoleum of memories, silent and cold. Ethan, too young to fully comprehend the finality of death, waited in vain for his mother to return, for his father to smile again, for life to return to normal. As the years passed, the distance between Ethan and his father grew. Robert Calloway, once a doting father, became a distant figure, more CEO than dad. He pushed Ethan to excel, to be worthy of the Calloway name, but rarely offered the emotional support the boy craved. Ethan threw himself into his studies, hoping that each perfect grade, each academic achievement would finally earn his father's approval and bridge the chasm between them. Despite the privilege that surrounded him, Ethan felt isolated and alone. The other children at his elite private school were more interested in his family's wealth and status than in Ethan himself. He learned to be guarded, to keep people at arm's length, never quite sure if they liked him for who he was or for what his name represented. It was in the quiet of the Calloway's vast garage that Ethan found solace. Among the gleaming classic cars his father collected, Ethan discovered a passion for automobiles that went beyond their family business. He spent hours studying each vehicle, learning their histories, understanding the engineering that made them marvels of their time. In these machines, Ethan found a connection to his father that words failed to forge. As Ethan grew into a young man, he felt the weight of expectation heavy on his shoulders. The future of Calloway Automotive was his birthright, a destiny he both embraced and resented. He threw himself into learning every aspect of the business, determined to prove himself worthy of the legacy he was meant to uphold. At 30, Ethan was a rising star in the company, his natural business acumen and innovative ideas earning him respect in the boardroom. Yet for all his outward success, he felt a gnawing emptiness, a sense that something was missing in his life. The emotional walls he had built in childhood remained firmly in place, keeping others at a safe distance, protecting him from the pain of loss he had experienced so young. Enter Victor Hartley, a figure who would play a pivotal role in both Ethan and Sarah's lives, though they didn't know it yet. Victor had been Robert Calloway's right-hand man for decades, a trusted advisor and friend who had helped steer Calloway Automotive through both boom times and recessions. To Ethan, Uncle Victor was a constant presence, often more attentive and supportive than his own father. Victor Hartley presented a polished, professional image to the world. His tailored suits and silver hair gave him an air of distinguished authority, while his charisma and sharp business acumen made him a formidable presence in any boardroom. He had a gift for making everyone feel heard and valued, a skill that had served him well as he climbed the corporate ladder. To the outside world, Victor was the epitome of corporate success, wealthy, respected, and influential. His rags-to-riches story was often cited as an example of the American dream in action. From humble beginnings, Victor had worked his way up, his partnership with Robert Calloway the crowning achievement of a stellar career. What few people knew, however, was the ambition that burned beneath Victor's carefully cultivated exterior. For years he had played the role of the loyal lieutenant, all the while nursing dreams of taking control of Calloway Automotive for himself. He saw himself as the true visionary, the one who should be at the helm of the company he had helped build. As Ethan began to take on more responsibility within the company, Victor saw both a threat and an opportunity. The young Calloway heir was sharp, there was no denying that, but he lacked the cutthroat instinct Victor believed was necessary to thrive in the automotive industry. Victor began to plot, looking for ways to manipulate the situation to his advantage, but little did Sarah or Ethan know that their lives were about to become entangled in a web of corporate intrigue and personal betrayal that would test them both to their limits. As they went about their separate lives, Sarah in her garage and Ethan in his high-rise office, the stage was being set for a drama that would change everything they thought they knew about themselves, their families, and the world they lived in. The day that would change Sarah Thompson's life forever started like any other. She arrived at Gearhead Garage just as the first rays of sunlight were peeking over the Detroit skyline. The familiar scent of oil and rubber greeting her, she pushed open the heavy metal door. Her colleagues, mostly men who had long since accepted her as one of their own, nodded their greetings as she made her way to her workstation. Sarah had just finished tying back her unruly curls when Jimmy, the front desk manager, poked his head around the corner. "Hey, Thompson, got a special one for you," he called out, a mischievous glint in his eye. "Some big shot with a classic car. Says he'll only let the best mechanic in Detroit touch it." Rolling her eyes good-naturedly, Sarah wiped her hands on a rag. All right, let's see what we've got." As she walked towards the customer area, Sarah had no idea that she was about to meet someone who would turn her carefully constructed world upside down. Standing there, looking somewhat out of place in his tailored suit, was Ethan Calloway. Ethan had spent the morning agonizing over whether to bring his beloved 1967 Mustang to this particular garage. It had been his mother's favorite car, and working on it together was one of the few activities that still connected him to his father. But the strange noises coming from the engine were beyond his expertise, and his usual mechanic was out of town. A colleague had recommended Gearhead Garage, praising their skill with classic cars. But as Sarah approached, Ethan found himself momentarily speechless. He had expected a gruff, older man, not this young woman with grease-stained hands and determined eyes. "Mr. Calloway," Sarah said, extending her hand. "I'm Sarah Thompson. I hear you've got a classic that needs some TLC." Ethan shook her hand, noting the firm grip and calloused palm. "Yes, it's a 67 Mustang. Been in the family for years. I'm hoping you can help me figure out what's wrong with it." Sarah's eyes lit up at the mention of the Mustang. "Beautiful cars. Why don't you bring it around to the garage and we'll take a look?" As Ethan maneuvered the car into the garage, Sarah couldn't help but admire the sleek lines and pristine condition of the vehicle. It was clear that this car was more than just a mode of transportation to its owner, it was a cherished possession. With the car up on the lift, Sarah got to work, her movements confident and precise as she began her diagnosis. Ethan watched, fascinated by her obvious expertise and the reverence with which she treated his mother's car. "So, Mr. Calloway," Sarah said as she worked, "what brings a guy like you to a place like this? I imagine Calloway Automotive has its own team of mechanics." Ethan chuckled, leaning against a nearby workbench. "Please call me Ethan. And you're right, we do. But this car, it's special. I wanted someone who would appreciate it, not just see it as another job." Sarah nodded, understanding all too well the emotional connection one could have with a vehicle. As she continued her inspection, she and Ethan fell into easy conversation, discussing the car's history and their shared love of classic automobiles. It was as Sarah was explaining her diagnosis, a relatively simple fix. Thankfully that Ethan found himself opening up in a way he rarely did with strangers. "You know, this was my mother's car," he said softly. "Working on it together is one of the few things my father and I still share." Sarah paused in her work, sensing the weight behind Ethan's words. "It must be nice to have that connection," she said carefully, thinking of her own strained relationship with her parents. Ethan's laugh was tinged with bitterness. "Nice isn't exactly the word I'd use. Complicated, maybe. My father, he's not an easy man to know." Something in Ethan's tone resonated with Sarah. Against her better judgment, she found herself sharing a bit of her own story. "I get that. Family can be challenging. Sometimes the people who are supposed to be closest to us end up being the most distant." Their eyes met, and for a moment a current of understanding passed between them. Two people from vastly different worlds, yet somehow speaking the same language. The moment was broken by the sound of Ethan's phone ringing. He glanced at the screen, his expression darkening. "I'm sorry, I have to take this," he said, stepping away to answer the call. Sarah returned to her work, but she couldn't help overhearing snippets of Ethan's conversation. His tone had changed completely, all warmth replaced by clipped, professional responses. "Yes, I saw the discrepancies. No, I haven't brought it to my father yet. I need more time to investigate." When Ethan returned, the easy rapport they had built was gone, replaced by a palpable tension. Sarah could see the worry lines etched on his forehead, the way his shoulders had tensed up. "Everything okay?" she asked, wiping her hands on a rag. But Ethan forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just business. Nothing for you to worry about." He glanced at his watch, his expression becoming more harried. "How much longer do you think the repairs will take?" Sarah explained the process, assuring him that the car would be ready by the end of the day. As Ethan prepared to leave, arranging for a cab back to his office, he hesitated. "Sarah," he said, his voice low and urgent. "What you overheard? I'd appreciate if you could keep that to yourself. Corporate matters, you understand." Sarah nodded, although a part of her bristled at the implication that she might gossip about a client's private business. Of course. Client confidentiality is something we take seriously here. Ethan seemed to realize how his request had sounded. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to imply, it's just, there's a lot at stake." "More than you know?" Something in his tone made Sarah pause. She had seen enough in her life to recognize when someone was carrying a heavy burden. Against her better judgment, she found herself saying, "Listen, I don't know what's going on, and it's none of my business. But if you ever need someone to talk to, someone outside of your world, well, you know where to find me." Ethan looked at her for a long moment, surprise and something like gratitude flickering in his eyes. "Thank you," he said softly. "I might just take you up on that." As Ethan left the garage, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that their paths would cross again. Little did she know just how entangled their lives were about to become, or the dangers that lay ahead as Ethan delved deeper into the discrepancies he had uncovered. For Ethan, the drive back to Callaway Automotive headquarters was a blur of conflicting emotions, the warmth of his interaction with Sarah Ward with the cold dread that had settled in his stomach following the phone call. He had stumbled upon financial irregularities that hinted at something far more sinister than simple accounting errors. The thought that someone within the company, someone he had trusted, might be involved in fraud was almost too much to bear. As he stepped into his office, Ethan knew he was standing at a crossroads. The evidence he had gathered so far was damning, but incomplete. To pursue this further would mean potentially upending everything he had ever known, risking his relationship with his father and the future of the company that bore their name. Yet, as he sat at his desk, staring at the spreadsheets that had started it all, Ethan knew he couldn't simply let this go. Whatever the cost, he had to uncover the truth. And somehow, instinctively, he felt that the mechanic he had just met, Sarah Thompson, with her straight-talking manner and perceptive eyes, might be just the ally he needed in the fight ahead. The next few days were a whirlwind for both Sarah and Ethan. Sarah found herself distracted at work, her mind constantly drifting back to the enigmatic Ethan Callaway and the tension she had sensed in him. She chided herself for getting involved, reminding herself that the problems of rich executives were far removed from her world. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Ethan than met the eye. For Ethan, the days were filled with clandestine investigations and mounting anxiety. Every new piece of evidence he uncovered only served to deepen his suspicions. The financial discrepancies he had initially discovered were just the tip of the iceberg. There were phantom projects, inflated costs, and money being funneled into offshore accounts. The more he dug, the more certain he became that this was no mere accounting error, but a deliberate and systematic fraud. It was on a rainy Tuesday evening, nearly a week after their first meeting, that Ethan found himself once again at Gearhead Garage. The place was quieter now, most of the day's shift having gone home. Sarah was just finishing up, wiping her hands on a rag as she prepared to close up shop. She looked up in surprise as Ethan walked in, his usually immaculate appearance somewhat disheveled, dark circles under his eyes betraying his lack of sleep. "Ethan, is everything okay with the Mustang?" Ethan shook his head, running a hand through his hair. "The car's fine, Sarah. I need your help. Can we talk?" Sensing the urgency in his voice, Sarah nodded, leading him to a small office at the back of the garage. As they sat down, Ethan took a deep breath, as if steeling himself for what he was about to say. "I'm sorry to involve you in this, Sarah. I know we barely know each other, but I don't know who else I can trust." He paused, his eyes meeting hers. "What I'm about to tell you, it could change everything. Are you sure you want to hear it?" Sarah leaned forward, her expression serious. "Ethan, you came here for a reason. Whatever it is, I'm willing to listen." And so Ethan began to explain. He told her about the financial discrepancies he had discovered, the evidence of fraud that seemed to implicate some of the highest-ranking executives in Callaway Automotive. As he spoke, Sarah listened intently, her quick mind already beginning to process the implications of what she was hearing. "The thing is," Sarah Ethan said, his voice low and intense, "I can't go to the authorities yet. I don't have enough concrete evidence, and if I'm wrong about this, if I'm misinterpreting something, it could destroy the company my family has built over generations." Sarah nodded slowly, understanding the weight of the situation. "So what do you need from me?" Ethan leaned back, a glimmer of hope in his eyes for the first time since he'd walked in. "Your perspective, your skills. You see things differently than I do, Sarah. You understand how things work on a practical level, not just on paper. I think you might be able to help me find the proof I need." For a moment, Sarah was silent, weighing the implications of what Ethan was asking. Getting involved in corporate espionage was the last thing she had ever imagined for herself. Yet, as she looked at Ethan, saw the desperation and determination in his eyes, she knew she couldn't turn her back on him. "All right," she said finally, "I'm in. But Ethan, you have to promise me something. If we find proof of illegal activities, we take it to the authorities, no matter who it implicates." Ethan nodded solemnly. "You have my word." As they began to plan their investigation, neither Sarah nor Ethan could have anticipated the chain of events they were setting in motion. Nor could they have known that at that very moment, in a luxurious office across town, Victor Hartley was beginning to suspect that his carefully constructed house of cards might be in danger of collapsing. Over the next few weeks, Sarah and Ethan fell into a rhythm. By day, they went about their normal lives, Sarah at the garage, Ethan at Callaway Automotive. But nights and weekends were devoted to their clandestine investigation. They pored over financial records, tracked shipments, and pieced together a complex puzzle of shell companies and fraudulent transactions. Sarah's practical knowledge proved invaluable. She could spot discrepancies in parts orders and manufacturing processes that Ethan might have missed. Her experience in the day-to-day workings of auto repair gave her insights into where corners might be cut or costs inflated. As they worked together, Sarah and Ethan found themselves growing closer. Late nights hunched over documents turned into conversations about their lives, their dreams, their fears. Sarah opened up about her difficult childhood, the struggles she had faced as a woman in a male-dominated field. Ethan shared the pain of losing his mother, the distant relationship with his father, the pressure of living up to the Callaway name. They were an unlikely pair, the rough around the edges mechanic and the polished corporate heir. Yet in each other they found understanding and acceptance they had never experienced before. It was during one of these late-night sessions, as they were making a breakthrough in tracing a particularly complex series of transactions, that Sarah felt a sudden wave of nausea wash over her. She brushed it off as exhaustion, but as the feeling persisted over the next few days, a niggling suspicion began to form in the back of her mind. On a sunny Saturday morning, while Ethan was meeting with a potential whistleblower from within Callaway Automotive, Sarah found herself sitting on the edge of her bathtub, staring in disbelief at a positive pregnancy test. The father was Mike, her ex-boyfriend, who had left town months ago without so much as a goodbye. They had been careful, or so she thought. But now here she was, pregnant and alone, in the middle of what was quickly becoming a dangerous corporate espionage plot. Sarah's mind raced. How could she bring a child into this mess? How could she tell Ethan? Would he want her to step away from the investigation? The thought of abandoning him now, when they were so close to uncovering the truth, was unthinkable. As she sat there, one hand unconsciously moving to her still flat stomach, Sarah made a decision. She would keep the baby, and she would see this investigation through to the end. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them head-on, just as she had faced every other obstacle in her life. When Ethan arrived at her apartment later that day, his eyes bright with excitement over the new information he had gathered, Sarah knew she had to tell him. As he launched into an explanation of his findings, she interrupted gently. "Ethan, wait. There's something I need to tell you." Ethan paused, noting the serious look on Sarah's face. "What is it? Is everything okay?" Sarah took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant." For a moment Ethan was silent, shock evident on his face. Then, to Sarah's surprise, he broke into a wide smile. "Sarah, that's amazing. Congratulations." His reaction caught Sarah off guard. She had expected disappointment, maybe even anger at the complication this would bring to their investigation. Instead, Ethan's genuine joy brought tears to her eyes. "You're not upset?" she asked hesitantly. Ethan's expression softened. He moved closer, taking her hands in his. "Sarah, why would I be upset? This is your life, your choice. I'm honored that you trust me enough to share this with me." Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. "I was worried you'd want me to step back from the investigation." Ethan shook his head firmly. "Absolutely not. Not unless that's what you want. Sarah, you're one of the strongest people I know. If anyone can handle this, it's you. And I'll be here to support you every step of the way." As Sarah looked into Ethan's eyes, she felt a surge of emotion. In that moment, she realized that her feelings for him had grown into something deeper than friendship. But before she could examine that realization too closely, Ethan spoke again. "Now, let's get back to work. We're close to something big. I can feel it." And so, with renewed determination, they dove back into their investigation. As the weeks passed, Sarah's pregnancy progressed, and their case against the corrupt elements within Callaway Automotive grew stronger. They were on the verge of a major breakthrough, ready to bring their evidence to the authorities. But little did they know forces were aligning against them. Victor Hartley, growing increasingly paranoid, had begun to suspect that someone was onto his schemes. He had set his own investigators to work, determined to root out any threat to his carefully constructed empire of fraud. As Sarah and Ethan raced against time to gather the final pieces of evidence they needed, the net was closing in around them. The stage was set for a confrontation that would change all of their lives forever and test the bonds of trust and loyalty they had forged in the crucible of their shared mission. As the weeks turned into months, Sarah and Ethan's relationship deepened in ways neither of them had anticipated. Their late-night investigation sessions often stretched into the early hours of the morning, fueled by a shared determination to uncover the truth and a growing comfort in each other's presence. They found themselves sharing more than just information about the case. They shared stories, dreams, and fears. For Sarah, it was a novel experience to feel so understood and accepted. Ethan listened without judgment as she recounted her challenging childhood, the struggle to prove herself in a male-dominated field, and her fears about impending motherhood. In turn, she provided a sympathetic ear as Ethan opened up about the pressure of living up to the Callaway name, the distant relationship with his father, and the lingering pain of losing his mother at a young age. As Sarah's pregnancy progressed, Ethan proved to be an unexpected source of support. He insisted on accompanying her to doctor's appointments, pored over pregnancy books with the same intensity he applied to financial records, and even attempted to baby-proof her small apartment, much to Sarah's amused exasperation. One particularly memorable evening, as they sat surrounded by stacks of documents in Sarah's living room, Ethan suddenly looked up with a mischievous glint in his eye. "You know," he said, setting aside a folder, "I think we've earned a break. How about we do something completely unrelated to corporate fraud for odds?" Sarah raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What did you have in mind?" Ethan grinned, standing up and offering her his hand. "Let's go for a drive." Despite her initial protests about the lateness of the hour, Sarah found herself being ushered into Ethan's restored Mustang. As they cruised through the quiet streets of Detroit, the cool night air whipping through the open windows, Sarah felt a sense of freedom she hadn't experienced in years. Ethan drove them to a small, secluded lookout point overlooking the city. As they sat on the hood of the car, gazing at the twinkling lights of Detroit spread out before them, Sarah felt a surge of emotion. "It's beautiful," she murmured, unconsciously leaning into Ethan's side. Ethan wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "You're beautiful," he said softly, his eyes meeting hers. The kiss that followed was gentle, tentative at first, then deepening with a passion that took them both by surprise. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Sarah felt a mix of exhilaration and fear. "Ethan," she began, her voice hesitant, "I don't know if this is a good idea. We're in the middle of a dangerous investigation. I'm pregnant with another man's child. It's complicated." Ethan took her hand, his expression serious. "Sarah, I know it's complicated, but the way I feel about you, it's the simplest, most certain thing in my life right now. Whatever challenges we face, I want to face them with you. If you'll have me." Sarah looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity there, and felt her doubts begin to melt away. She knew there would be obstacles ahead, but in that moment under the starlit sky, she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of a future with Ethan. As their relationship blossomed, so too did their investigation into the corruption at Callaway Automotive. With each passing day, they uncovered more evidence of Victor Hartley's elaborate fraud scheme. False invoices, phantom projects, offshore accounts. The web of deceit seemed to grow more complex with every stone they overturned. Ethan's insider knowledge of the company, combined with Sarah's practical understanding of the automotive industry, proved to be a formidable combination. They meticulously documented every piece of evidence, building a case that they hoped would be irrefutable when presented to the authorities. However, as they delved deeper into the investigation, the stakes grew higher and the danger more palpable. Ethan began to notice subtle changes in the office atmosphere. Conversations would stop abruptly when he entered a room, and he could feel eyes on him when his back was turned. It was clear that their activities had not gone unnoticed. Sarah, too, faced increasing pressure. Anonymous phone calls in the middle of the night, a sense of being watched when she left work. The signs of surveillance were subtle but unmistakable. Despite her growing fear, she remained determined to see the investigation through to its conclusion. Their concerns came to a head one evening when Ethan arrived at Sarah's apartment, his face pale and his hands shaking slightly. As soon as she opened the door, he rushed inside, checking to make sure they were alone before speaking. "Sarah, I think they're onto us," he said in a low, urgent voice. "I overheard Victor on the phone today. He was talking about taking care of the problem. I think he knows we're investigating him." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She instinctively placed a hand on her growing belly, a protective gesture that didn't go unnoticed by Ethan. He moved closer, placing his hand over hers. "I won't let anything happen to you or the baby," he said fiercely. "We need to be more careful from now on. No more meetings at the office or here. We'll find a secure place to continue our work." Sarah nodded, her mind racing. "What about the evidence we've gathered so far? If Victor suspects something, he might try to destroy it." Ethan's expression was grim. "I've made copies of everything and stored them in a secure location. But we need to move fast. I think it's time we considered bringing in outside help." As they discussed their options, weighing the risks of involving the authorities against the danger of continuing alone, neither of them could shake the feeling that they were racing against time. The net was closing in around them, and they knew that the next steps they took could determine not just the outcome of their investigation, but potentially their very lives. The growing tension of their situation was compounded by an unexpected complication: the return of Mike, Sarah's ex-boyfriend and the father of her unborn child. His reappearance in Detroit sent shockwaves through the delicate balance Sarah and Ethan had established. Mike showed up at the garage one afternoon, his arrival as sudden and disruptive as his departure had been months earlier. Sarah was underneath a car when she heard his voice, a sound that made her freeze in place. "Sarah? Are you here?" Slowly she rolled out from under the vehicle, wiping her hands on a rag as she stood to face him. Mike looked much the same as she remembered: tall, handsome in a rugged way, with the charm that had once swept her off her feet. But now, as she looked at him, all she felt was a mix of anger and weariness. "Mike," she said, her voice carefully neutral, "what are you doing here?" He had the grace to look sheepish, running a hand through his hair in a gesture she once found endearing. I heard you were pregnant. Is it true?" Sarah's hand instinctively went to her belly, which was now noticeably rounded. "Yes, it's true. How did you find out?" Mike shrugged. "Small town, word gets around. Sarah, I'm sorry for leaving the way I did. I was scared, confused. But I'm back now, and I want to make things right. I want to be there for you and the baby." Sarah felt a surge of emotions: anger at his presumption, confusion at his sudden change of heart, and a small, traitorous part of her that remembered the good times they had shared. But overriding it all was a fierce protectiveness for the life she had built in his absence and for her relationship with Ethan. "Mike, you can't just walk back into my life and expect everything to be okay," she said, her voice firm. "A lot has changed since you left. I've changed." Before Mike could respond, the sound of a car pulling up outside caught their attention. Moments later, Ethan walked in, stopping short when he saw Mike. His eyes darted between Sarah and Mike, a flicker of understanding and hurt passing across his face. "Ethan," Sarah said, moving towards him. "This is Mike. He's the baby's father." The tension in the room was palpable as Ethan and Mike sized each other up. Ethan was the first to break the silence, extending his hand with a politeness that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Nice to meet you, Mike. I'm Ethan Calloway, Sarah's friend." Mike shook Ethan's hand, his grip perhaps a bit firmer than necessary. "Calloway? As in Calloway Automotive? What's a guy like you doing hanging around a garage?" The implied insult wasn't lost on either Sarah or Ethan. Sarah stepped between them, her voice tight with barely contained anger. "Ethan and I are working on a project together, and he's been more than just a friend to me, Mike. He's been there for me, for us." She gestured to her belly, "In ways you haven't been." Mike's face darkened. "I told you I want to make things right. I'm here now, ready to step up and be a father. Doesn't that count for something?" Sarah sighed, feeling the weight of the situation bearing down on her. "It counts, Mike. But it doesn't erase the past few months. I need time to think, to figure out what's best for me and the baby." As Mike nodded reluctantly and turned to leave, promising to be in touch, Sarah couldn't help but notice the tension in Ethan's shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. She knew they had a lot to talk about, and she dreaded the conversation that was to come. As Sarah's pregnancy progressed, the challenges they faced seemed to multiply. Ethan's father, Robert Calloway, had caught wind of his son's frequent absences from the office and his unusual interest in the company's financial records. One evening, as Ethan was preparing to leave for another late-night session with Sarah, his father cornered him in the parking garage. Ethan Roberts' voice echoed in the concrete structure, causing his son to freeze in his tracks. "We need to talk." Ethan turned slowly, schooling his features into a mask of nonchalance. "Dad? What are you doing here so late?" Robert Calloway was an imposing figure, his silver hair and tailored suit a testament to years of corporate success. He fixed Ethan with a piercing stare. "I could ask you the same question. You've been distracted lately, son. Spending a lot of time away from the office. Care to explain?" Ethan's mind raced, searching for a plausible explanation that wouldn't give away their investigation. "I've been working on a special project, Dad. Something that could be big for the company. I didn't want to say anything until I was sure." Robert's eyes narrowed skeptically. "A project? And does this project have anything to do with the mechanic you've been seen with? What was her name?" "Sarah Thompson." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. If his father knew about Sarah, how much else did he know? He struggled to keep his voice steady as he replied, "Sarah's been helping me with some technical aspects of the project. She has expertise that's been invaluable." "Expertise?" Robert scoffed. "She's a garage mechanic, Ethan. What could she possibly offer to Calloway Automotive that our own engineers can't?" Anger flared in Ethan's chest at his father's dismissive tone. "Sarah is brilliant, Dad. She sees things from a practical perspective that's been eye-opening. And she's important to me." Robert's expression softened slightly at the emotion in his son's voice. "Ethan, I'm worried about you. This isn't like you sneaking around, keeping secrets. Whatever this project is, whatever's going on with this woman, I hope you know what you're doing." As Robert turned to leave, he paused, looking back at Ethan with a mix of concern and disappointment. "Remember, son, you're a Calloway. You have a responsibility to this company, to our family legacy. Don't let some flight of fancy jeopardize everything we've built." Ethan watched his father walk away, a knot of guilt and frustration forming in his stomach. He knew his father's words came from a place of concern, but the implied judgment of Sarah and their relationship stung. More than ever, he felt the weight of his family name pressing down on him. When Ethan arrived at Sarah's apartment later that night, she could immediately sense something was wrong. "Ethan? What happened?" she asked, leading him to the couch. As Ethan recounted his conversation with his father, Sarah listened quietly, her hand resting protectively over her growing belly. When he finished, she was silent for a long moment before speaking. "Ethan," she said softly, "maybe your father's right." "Not about me," she added quickly, seeing the protest forming on his lips, "but about the risks we're taking. This investigation, it's dangerous. And now with the baby coming, maybe we should consider stepping back." Ethan shook his head vehemently. "No, Sarah, we can't give up now. We're so close to uncovering the truth." And besides, he added, taking her hand in his, "I'm not ashamed of us. Of what we have, I don't want to hide anymore." Sarah squeezed his hand, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't want to hide either. But Ethan, your family, your position in the company, I don't want to be the reason you lose all that." Ethan cupped her face gently, his eyes intense. "Sarah, listen to me. You and this baby, you're my family now too. Whatever happens with the company, with my father, we'll face it together, okay?" Sarah nodded, leaning into his embrace. As they sat there, holding each other, both were acutely aware of the challenges that lay ahead. The disapproval of Ethan's family was just one more obstacle in a path that seemed increasingly fraught with danger. Meanwhile, across town, Mike was grappling with his own turmoil. His return to Detroit and discovery of Sarah's pregnancy had thrown him into a tailspin of guilt and regret. He found himself haunting the streets near the garage, hoping for glimpses of Sarah, trying to work up the courage to approach her again. One evening, as he nursed a beer in a bar not far from Gearhead Garage, he overheard a conversation that made his blood run cold. "Yeah, the Calloway kid," and that mechanic chick, a gruff voice was saying. "Boss wants us to send them a message. Make sure they understand the consequences of sticking their noses where they don't belong." Mike's head snapped up, his attention fully focused on the two men in the corner booth. They were large, intimidating figures, the kind of men Mike had encountered in his less savory past dealings. "What about the girl being pregnant?" the second man asked. "Boss said to be careful, right?" The first man shrugged. "Accidents happen. As long as we get the point across, he doesn't care about the details." Mike felt a surge of protective anger. Whatever had happened between him and Sarah, whatever mistakes he had made, he couldn't stand by and let her be hurt. Especially not when she was carrying his child. As the men left the bar, Mike followed at a discreet distance. His mind raced, trying to figure out what to do. Should he warn Sarah? Go to the police? But what if he was misunderstanding the situation? In the end, Mike decided to keep watch. He trailed the men to a nondescript warehouse, memorizing the address and the license plate of their car. Then, heart pounding, he made his way to Sarah's apartment. When Sarah opened the door to find Mike standing there, looking disheveled and agitated, her first instinct was to slam it shut. But something in his expression made her pause. "Mike? What's going on?" "Sarah, listen to me," Mike said urgently, his eyes darting around as if expecting danger to materialize at any moment. "I think you and Ethan are in trouble. I overheard some guys talking about sending you a message, making you back off from whatever you're involved in." Sarah felt her heart rate quicken, one hand instinctively moving to protect her belly. "What are you talking about? How do you know this?" Mike ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in his voice. "I know it sounds crazy, but I'm telling you the truth. These guys were serious, Sarah. They mentioned your pregnancy, said accidents could happen. Please, you have to be careful." As the implications of Mike's words sank in, Sarah felt a wave of fear wash over her. She and Ethan had known they were taking risks with their investigation, but this made it all too real. "Thank you for telling me, Mike," she said softly, her mind already racing with what she needed to do next. "I appreciate you looking out for us." Mike nodded, relief visible on his face. "I know I messed up, Sarah. I know I don't have any right to be in your life. But I want you to know I'm here if you need me. Whatever's going on, whatever trouble you're in, I want to help." As Mike turned to leave, Sarah called out to him, "Mike, be careful, okay? If these people are as dangerous as you say." He gave her a small, sad smile. "Don't worry about me, Sarah. Just take care of yourself and that little one." As Sarah closed the door, her hand shaking slightly, she knew that the game had changed. The danger was no longer abstract, no longer something they could pretend was a distant threat. It was real, immediate, and threatening not just her and Ethan, but the innocent life growing inside her. With trembling fingers, she dialed Ethan's number. As she waited for him to pick up, Sarah made a silent vow. Whatever came next, whatever sacrifices they had to make, she would protect her child. Even if it meant walking away from the investigation, from the life she and Ethan had begun to build together. The phone rang once, twice, and then Ethan's voice came through, warm and familiar. "Sarah? Is everything okay?" Taking a deep breath, Sarah steeled herself for the conversation ahead. "Ethan, we need to talk. Something's happened. And I think it's time we reconsider our plans." As she began to explain Mike's warning, Sarah could feel the future she had imagined with Ethan beginning to slip away. But as her free hand cradled her swollen belly, she knew that some things were more important than exposing corporate fraud or even following her heart. The safety of her child had to come first, no matter the cost. Once Mike was gone, Ethan turned to Sarah, his expression a mix of hurt and confusion. "Sarah, why didn't you tell me he was back?" Sarah ran a hand through her hair, frustration evident in her voice. "Because I didn't know Ethan. He just showed up out of the blue, talking about wanting to be involved in the baby's life. I'm as surprised as you are." Ethan was quiet for a moment, his gaze fixed on a point somewhere over Sarah's shoulder. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and controlled. "And what do you want? Do you want him to be involved?" The vulnerability in Ethan's question made Sarah's heart ache. She moved closer to him, taking his hands in hers. "Ethan, look at me," she said softly. When he met her eyes, she continued, "Mike is the baby's biological father, and I can't change that. But you're the one who's been here for us, who supported us every step of the way. You're the one I want to build a future with, if you still want that." The tension seemed to drain out of Ethan at her words. He pulled her into a tight embrace, burying his face in her hair. "Of course I still want that," he murmured. "I love you, Sarah, both of you. I guess I got scared for a moment there." As they stood there, holding each other in the quiet of the garage, Sarah felt a sense of peace settle over her. She knew there would be challenges ahead: Mike's return, the ongoing investigation, the impending birth of her child, but in that moment she felt stronger than ever, ready to face whatever came their way. Little did they know, the complications brought by Mike's return were just the beginning. As they left the garage that evening, hand in hand, they were unaware of the figure watching them from a parked car across the street. Victor Hartley lowered his binoculars, a cold smile playing on his lips. The pieces were falling into place, and he now had the leverage he needed to put an end to their meddling once and for all. The tension in the boardroom was palpable as Ethan Calloway stood at the head of the long mahogany table, his palms pressed flat against its polished surface. The eyes of every board member were fixed on him, a mix of curiosity, skepticism, and in some cases barely concealed hostility. Victor Hartley sat to Ethan's right, his face an impassive mask that betrayed nothing of the turmoil Ethan knew must be churning beneath the surface. Ethan took a deep breath, steadying himself. This was the moment of truth, the culmination of months of secret investigation and careful planning. He could feel the weight of the evidence in the folder before him, each page a potential nail in the coffin of Victor's fraudulent empire. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," Ethan began, his voice clear and steady despite the rapid beating of his heart, "I've called this emergency meeting because I've uncovered evidence of serious financial irregularities within Calloway Automotive." A murmur rippled through the room. Ethan saw his father, Robert Calloway, lean forward, his brow furrowed in concern. Victor remained motionless, but Ethan noticed a slight tightening around his eyes. "Over the past several months, I've been conducting an independent investigation into our company's finances," Ethan continued. "What I've found is deeply troubling. There's evidence of systematic fraud, embezzlement, and misuse of company funds on a massive scale." The murmur grew louder. Several board members exchanged worried glances. Victor's hand twitched almost imperceptibly towards his phone, but he seemed to think better of it and remained still. Ethan began to lay out his evidence, methodically walking the board through the complex web of shell companies, falsified invoices, and offshore accounts he and Sarah had uncovered. He presented financial records, email correspondences, and shipping manifests, each piece adding to the damning picture of corruption at the heart of Calloway Automotive. As he spoke, Ethan could see the shock and disbelief on the faces of most board members. Some looked angry, others devastated. His father's expression was unreadable, a mix of pride and pain that Ethan couldn't quite decipher. Victor, for his part, remained remarkably composed. When Ethan finally paused for breath, it was Victor who broke the stunned silence that had fallen over the room. "This is quite an elaborate tale you've spun," Victor said, his voice smooth and controlled. "I must say I'm impressed by your imagination. However, I'm afraid you've let your inexperience, and dare I say your personal feelings, cloud your judgment." Ethan felt a flare of anger at Victor's dismissive tone, but he forced himself to remain calm. He had anticipated this response. "This isn't imagination, Victor. These are facts, backed up by hard evidence. Evidence that I'm prepared to turn over to the authorities if necessary." Victor's smile didn't waver, but Ethan saw a flash of something dangerous in his eyes. "Authorities? Come now, Ethan. Let's not be hasty. I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation for any discrepancies you think you found. After all, the intricacies of corporate finance can be quite complex for someone new to the field." The condescension in Victor's voice was clear, and Ethan saw several board members nodding in agreement. He realized with a sinking feeling that Victor's influence ran deep, that many in this room owed their positions to him or were complicit in his schemes. But Ethan wasn't done yet. He had one more card to play, one that he hoped would tip the scales decisively in his favor. "I anticipated you might try to dismiss these findings," Ethan said, his voice gaining strength. "That's why I didn't come here alone. I have a witness, someone who can corroborate everything I've presented and provide additional testimony." At that moment, as if on cue, the boardroom door opened. Sarah Thompson walked in, her head held high despite the obvious swell of her pregnancy beneath her simple but professional dress. A ripple of surprise went through the room. Ethan saw his father's eyebrows shoot up, while Victor's composure finally cracked, a look of genuine shock crossing his face. "This is Sarah Thompson," Ethan introduced her, moving to stand beside her in a show of unity. "She's been instrumental in uncovering this fraud. Her expertise in automotive engineering and her outsider's perspective were crucial in piecing together the evidence I've presented to you today." Sarah stepped forward, her voice clear and confident despite the intimidating setting. "Good morning," she began. "I know my presence here might seem unusual, but I can assure you that everything Mr. Calloway has told you is true. I've seen the evidence firsthand, and I've helped to uncover much of it myself." She went on to provide technical details that supported Ethan's claims, explaining how certain parts had been swapped out for inferior products, how production costs had been artificially inflated, and how quality control measures had been bypassed to increase profits. As Sarah spoke, Ethan could see the tide of opinion in the room beginning to shift. Her practical knowledge and clear explanations were cutting through the fog of financial jargon, making the reality of the fraud impossible to ignore. Victor, however, was not going down without a fight. As soon as Sarah finished speaking, he stood up, his face flushed with anger. "This is preposterous," he exclaimed. "Are we really going to take the word of some mechanic over years of audited financial statements? This woman has no place in this boardroom, and I for one question her motives in involving herself in our company's affairs." The barely veiled contempt in Victor's voice sparked murmurs of both agreement and disapproval from the board members. Ethan felt a surge of protective anger, but before he could respond, Sarah stepped forward, her eyes flashing. "My motives, Mr. Hartley, are simple," she said, her voice level but intense. "I believe in honesty, in doing what's right. When I discovered the extent of the fraud being perpetrated here, I couldn't in good conscience stay silent. Your actions haven't just hurt this company. They've put people's lives at risk. The substandard parts you've been using to cut costs. They could fail catastrophically. You're gambling with people's safety for the sake of profit." Her words hung in the air, the gravity of the accusation silencing even Victor momentarily. Ethan saw his father straighten in his chair, a look of grim realization crossing his face. It was at that moment that Robert Calloway finally spoke. "Victor," he said, his voice heavy with disappointment and barely contained anger, "is this true? Have you been compromising our safety standards?" Victor turned to Robert, his longtime friend and partner, desperation creeping into his voice. "Robert, you can't possibly believe this. Everything I've done has been for the good of the company. Sometimes hard decisions have to be made to stay competitive." Robert's face hardened. "Safety is never negotiable, Victor. You know that. It's been our company's guiding principle since my father founded it." The room erupted into chaos, board members arguing amongst themselves, some defending Victor, others calling for his immediate removal. Ethan and Sarah stood firm amidst the storm, their hands clasped together, drawing strength from each other. As the shouting reached a fever pitch, the boardroom door burst open once again. This time it was a team of FBI agents, led by a stern-faced woman who immediately commanded the room's attention. "Victor Hartley," she announced, her voice cutting through the din, "you're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and endangering public safety. We have a warrant to search these premises and seize all relevant documents." The room fell silent as the agents moved to handcuff a shell-shocked Victor. Ethan felt a mix of relief and sadness as he watched the man he had once looked up to being led away. He turned to Sarah, seeing his own complex emotions reflected in her eyes. As the dust began to settle, Robert Calloway approached Ethan and Sarah. He looked older suddenly, the weight of the day's revelations evident in the slump of his shoulders. But there was pride in his eyes as he looked at his son. "Ethan," he said softly, "I owe you an apology. I should have trusted you, should have seen what was happening under my own nose." He turned to Sarah, extending his hand. "And Ms. Thompson, I owe you a debt of gratitude. Your courage and integrity have saved this company." As Sarah shook Robert's hand, Ethan felt a wave of emotion wash over him. The road ahead would be challenging, rebuilding the company, regaining public trust, navigating the legal aftermath of Victor's crimes. But looking at Sarah, feeling the strength of her presence beside him, Ethan knew they could face whatever came next. Together they had exposed the truth, and in doing so had laid the foundation for a new chapter in both their lives and the future of Calloway Automotive. The aftermath of the board meeting was a whirlwind of activity. As news of Victor's arrest and the fraud at Calloway Automotive broke, Ethan and Sarah found themselves at the center of a media storm. Reporters camped outside the company headquarters, clamoring for statements and interviews. The stress of the situation was taking its toll on both of them, but especially on Sarah. It was a crisp autumn morning when Sarah woke up feeling different. At first she couldn't quite put her finger on what had changed, but as she struggled to sit up in bed, a sharp pain lanced through her abdomen. Her hands flew to her swollen belly, a sense of panic rising in her throat. "Ethan," she called out, her voice tight with fear. "Ethan, something's wrong." Ethan burst into the bedroom, his hair still damp from the shower. One look at Sarah's pale face and he knew this was serious. "I'm calling an ambulance," he said, already reaching for his phone. The ride to the hospital was a blur of sirens and worried glances. Sarah gripped Ethan's hand tightly, trying to focus on her breathing as the contractions came harder and faster. This was too early, she thought desperately. The twins weren't due for another 6 weeks. At the hospital, they were immediately whisked into the maternity ward. Dr. Patel, Sarah's obstetrician, met them with a concerned frown. "Sarah, I understand you're experiencing contractions. Let's take a look and see what's going on." As Dr. Patel examined her, Sarah could see the worry lines deepening on her face. "Sarah, it looks like you're in preterm labor. We're going to do everything we can to stop it, but I need to prepare you for the possibility that these babies might be coming today." Sarah felt a wave of fear wash over her. "But it's too early," she whispered, looking to Ethan for reassurance. "They're not ready." Ethan squeezed her hand, his own face pale with worry. "They're fighters, just like their mom. Whatever happens, we'll get through this together." The next few hours were a roller coaster of hope and fear. The medical team worked tirelessly to halt Sarah's labor, pumping her full of medication and monitoring her closely. For a while it seemed to be working. The contractions slowed, and Sarah began to hope that they had averted the crisis. But just as they were starting to relax, Sarah's water broke. Dr. Patel's expression turned grave. "I'm sorry, Sarah, but there's no stopping it now. We need to prepare for delivery." The delivery room was a flurry of activity. Nurses and doctors moved with practiced efficiency, setting up equipment and preparing for the arrival of premature twins. Sarah lay on the bed, her face contorted with pain and fear, while Ethan stood by her side, feeling helpless but determined to be her rock. After what felt like an eternity of pushing and pain, the first cry pierced the air. "It's a boy," Dr. Patel announced, quickly passing the tiny, wrinkled bundle to a waiting team of neonatal specialists. Sarah barely had time to catch her breath before the next contraction hit. The second delivery was harder, the baby stubbornly refusing to emerge. When the little girl finally arrived, her silence was deafening. "Why isn't she crying?" Sarah asked, panic rising in her voice. "What's wrong with her?" The room erupted into a frenzy of activity. The neonatal team worked on the silent infant, their voices terse and professional as they fought to stimulate her breathing. Ethan stood frozen, his eyes darting between Sarah and the team working on their daughter. After what felt like an eternity, a weak cry filled the room. Sarah let out a sob of relief, collapsing back against the pillows. But their ordeal was far from over. Dr. Patel approached them, her face serious. "Your son is doing well, all things considered. He's small, but his vitals are strong. Your daughter," however, she paused, choosing her words carefully. "We've detected a heart murmur. It could be nothing, just a result of her premature birth, but we need to run some tests to be sure." The next few days were a blur of beeping machines, hushed conversations with doctors, and long hours spent in the NICU. Sarah and Ethan learned to navigate the maze of tubes and wires surrounding their tiny children, marveling at how something so small could fight so hard. Their son, whom they named Jack, seemed to grow stronger by the day, but their daughter, Emma, struggled. The heart murmur Dr. Patel had detected turned out to be a congenital heart defect, one that would require surgery to correct. The good news, Dr. Chen, the pediatric cardiologist, explained, is that this type of defect is operable. The bad news is that Emma is still very small and weak. We'd like to wait until she's stronger before we attempt surgery, but we'll need to monitor her closely. Sarah and Ethan absorbed this information in stunned silence. The joy of becoming parents was tempered by the fear of what lay ahead for their little girl. As the days turned into weeks, they fell into a new routine. Ethan split his time between the hospital and Callaway Automotive, where he was working tirelessly to right the wrongs of Victor's tenure. Sarah practically lived in the NICU, only leaving when the nurses insisted she get some rest. It was during one of these enforced breaks that tragedy struck. Sarah had just stepped out to grab a quick coffee when alarms started blaring in the NICU. She rushed back to find a team of doctors surrounding Emma's incubator. "What's happening?" she cried, trying to push her way through. A nurse gently held her back. Emma's heart rate dropped suddenly. The doctors are doing everything they can. Sarah watched in horror as the medical team worked to stabilize her daughter. She fumbled for her phone, calling Ethan with shaking hands. "Ethan, you need to come now," she sobbed. "It's Emma." By the time Ethan arrived, breathless and disheveled, Emma had been rushed into emergency surgery. The doctors had decided they couldn't wait any longer to repair her heart defect. The hours that followed were the longest of Sarah and Ethan's lives. They sat in the waiting room, clinging to each other, barely speaking. Sarah's mind raced with regrets and what-ifs. If she hadn't gotten so involved in the investigation, if she had taken better care of herself during the pregnancy, if she had noticed something was wrong sooner. Ethan seemed to sense her thoughts. "This isn't your fault, Sarah," he said softly, pulling her closer. "Emma is strong. She's a fighter, just like her mom. She's going to pull through this." Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Dr. Chen emerged from the operating room. His face was tired, but there was a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "The surgery was successful," he announced. "Emma's not out of the woods yet, but her heart is functioning much better now. The next 24 hours will be critical." Sarah and Ethan clung to each other, overwhelmed by a mix of relief and lingering fear. They knew the road ahead would be long and uncertain, but for now their little girl was still fighting. As they stood by Emma's bedside later that night, watching the steady rise and fall of her tiny chest, Sarah felt a renewed sense of determination. Whatever challenges lay ahead Emma's recovery, Jack's development, the ongoing fallout from the Callaway automotive scandal, they would face them together, as a family. Ethan wrapped his arm around Sarah's waist, pressing a kiss to her temple. "We're going to get through this," he murmured. "All of us." Sarah nodded, her eyes never leaving Emma's face. In that moment, despite the beeping machines and sterile hospital environment, she felt a profound sense of love and connection to her children. They had been through so much already, these tiny fighters, and she vowed to be strong for them, to fight just as hard as they were. As the night deepened and the NICU quieted, Sarah and Ethan kept their vigil, drawing strength from each other and the quiet, persistent beep of the heart monitor, a constant reminder that against all odds, their little family was still whole, still fighting, still full of hope for the future. The days following Emma's surgery were a blur of hope and anxiety for Sarah and Ethan. They divided their time between the NICU, watching over their recovering daughter, and the nursery where Jack was growing stronger every day. It was during one of these quiet moments, as Sarah sat by Emma's incubator, gently stroking her daughter's tiny hand, that she received a call that once again turned her world upside down. Sarah Thompson, the voice on the other end, was unfamiliar, professional. "Yes, this is she," Sarah replied, her voice hushed so as not to disturb the sleeping babies around her. "Ms. Thompson, this is Detective Lisa Martinez from the Detroit Police Department. We've recently come across some information that we believe may be of interest to you. It's regarding your family history." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. Her family history had always been a source of pain and mystery. Abandoned by her parents at a young age, she had grown up with more questions than answers about her origins. "What? What kind of information?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling slightly. Detective Martinez's tone softened slightly. "Ms. Thompson, we've identified a woman who we believe may be your sister. Her name is Claire Donovan. She's been working as a financial analyst, and, well, it appears she may have some connection to the Callaway automotive case." Sarah's mind reeled. A sister, and somehow connected to the case that had consumed her life for the past months? It seemed too incredible to be true. I don't understand," Sarah stammered. "How is this possible? And what does it have to do with Callaway Automotive?" "We're still piecing together the details," Detective Martinez explained, "but it seems Ms. Donovan was employed by a subsidiary company that Victor Hartley used in his fraudulent schemes. We believe she may have crucial information about the extent of the fraud." Sarah's head was spinning. She glanced down at Emma, peacefully sleeping, unaware of the bombshell that had just been dropped into their lives. Does Claire know about me?" "Not yet," the detective replied. "We wanted to speak with you first. Ms. Thompson, we would like to arrange a meeting between you and Ms. Donovan. It could be beneficial for both our investigation and for you personally." After ending the call, Sarah sat in stunned silence. A sister. The word echoed in her mind, filled with possibilities and uncertainties. She had always longed for family, for connections to a past she barely remembered. But now that the opportunity was here, she felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. When Ethan arrived at the hospital later that day, he found Sarah lost in thought, her eyes fixed on Emma, but her mind clearly elsewhere. "Sarah? Is everything okay? Did something happen with Emma?" Sarah looked up, tears glistening in her eyes. "Ethan, I have a sister." As Sarah recounted her conversation with Detective Martinez, Ethan listened with growing amazement. "A sister? And she's involved with Callaway Automotive somehow. Sarah, this is incredible." Sarah nodded, still trying to process the information herself. "I don't know how to feel, Ethan. All my life I've wondered about my family, and now there's this person out there who shares my blood, who might have answers about our parents, about why they left us." Ethan took her hand, squeezing it gently. "Whatever you decide to do, I'm here for you. If you want to meet her, I'll support you. If you're not ready, that's okay too." Sarah took a deep breath, her gaze drifting back to Emma and then to Jack in his nearby crib. I think I need to do this. Not just for me, but for them too. They deserve to know their family, all of it." The meeting was arranged for the following week. Sarah paced nervously in the small conference room at the police station, her heart pounding. Ethan stood by her side, a steady, reassuring presence. When the door opened and Claire Donovan walked in, Sarah felt as though she was looking into a mirror from another life. Claire had the same dark curls, the same determined set to her jaw. But where Sarah's hands were calloused from years of mechanical work, Claire's were smooth, more accustomed to a keyboard than a wrench. For a moment the sisters simply stared at each other, years of separation and unasked questions hanging in the air between them. Then, almost simultaneously, they both took a step forward. Claire's voice was hesitant, thick with emotion. Sarah replied, her own voice barely above a whisper. And then they were hugging, tears flowing freely as years of loneliness and wandering melted away in the warmth of newfound connection. As they pulled apart, wiping away tears and laughing softly at the intensity of their emotions, Detective Martinez gently reminded them of the other reason for their meeting. "Ms. Donovan, we appreciate you coming in today. We have some questions about your work with Hartley Global Solutions." Claire's expression sobered. She glanced at Sarah, then back to the detective. "I'll tell you everything I know," she said firmly. "But first I need to explain some things to my sister." Over the next few hours, Claire unfolded a tale that left Sarah and Ethan reeling. She spoke of their parents, a young couple overwhelmed by addiction and poverty, making the heartbreaking decision to give up their children in hopes of giving them a better life. She told of her own journey through foster care, of the luck and determination that had led her to college and eventually to a career in finance. "I didn't know about you, Sarah," Claire said, her voice filled with regret. "Not until recently. I've been searching for years, trying to piece together our family history. When I took the job at Hartley Global Solutions, I had no idea of its connection to Callaway Automotive or to you." As Claire began to detail her growing suspicions about the company's financial practices, Sarah and Ethan exchanged glances. The pieces were starting to fall into place, revealing a picture more complex and far-reaching than they had imagined. "I think Victor Hartley knew who I was," Claire said softly. "I think he hired me as a way to keep tabs on you, Sarah. Maybe even as leverage if his schemes ever came to light." The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. The idea that Victor had known about her family, had potentially used her long-lost sister as a pawn in his game, filled her with a mixture of anger and sorrow. As the day wore on and Claire shared everything she knew about Victor's fraudulent practices, Sarah found herself studying her sister's face, looking for traces of herself, of their parents. Despite the heavy nature of their discussion, she felt a growing sense of connection, of pieces of herself falling into place. When the formal interview was over and Detective Martinez had left the room, the sisters found themselves alone with Ethan. An awkward silence fell, the weight of their shared history and the uncertain future hanging between them. It was Claire who finally broke the silence. "Sarah, I know this is a lot to take in, and I know we have a long way to go in getting to know each other, but I want you to know I'm so grateful to have found you. Whatever happens next, we're family." Sarah felt tears welling up again. She reached out, taking Claire's hand in hers. "Family," she repeated, the word feeling new and precious on her tongue. She glanced at Ethan, who nodded encouragingly. "But Claire, there's someone I'd like you to meet." "Two someones, actually." As they left the police station, heading towards the hospital where Jack and Emma waited, Sarah felt a sense of wonder at the twists and turns her life had taken. From a lonely, struggling mechanic to a key player in uncovering corporate fraud, to a mother of twins, and now to a sister reunited. Each step had led her here, to this moment of new beginnings and reconnected bonds. She didn't know what the future held for her relationship with Claire, for the ongoing investigation into Callaway Automotive, or for her growing family. But as she walked between her sister and the man she loved, Sarah felt a surge of hope and determination. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them with the strength of family, both the family she had found and the family she had built by her side. The weeks following Sarah's reunion with Claire were a whirlwind of emotions and activity. As Emma continued to recover and grow stronger in the NICU, Sarah found herself juggling her time between the hospital, meetings with investigators, and getting to know her newfound sister. Ethan, meanwhile, was consumed with the monumental task of rebuilding Callaway Automotive's reputation and restructuring the company in the wake of Victor's fraud. It was on a crisp autumn morning, as Sarah was preparing to head to the hospital for her daily visit with the twins, that everything changed. The knock on her apartment door was sharp and urgent. When she opened it, she found herself face to face with Detective Martinez, her expression grave. "MS Thompson, we need you and Mr. Callaway to come with us immediately. There's been a development in the case." Sarah's heart raced as she called Ethan, who rushed to meet them at the police station. As they were ushered into a conference room, Sarah's mind whirled with possibilities. Had they uncovered more evidence? Was Victor talking? But nothing could have prepared her for what came next. Detective Martinez sat across from them, her face serious. "We have reason to believe that your lives may be in danger. We've intercepted communications indicating that associates of Victor Hartley are planning to eliminate potential witnesses." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Sarah felt Ethan's hand tighten around hers as he spoke, his voice tense. "What kind of threat are we talking about here? And what about our children?" "We believe it's a credible threat," Martinez replied. "As for your children, we've already increased security at the hospital. But we think it's best if you both enter protective custody until we can neutralize the threat." Sarah's mind reeled. Protective custody? Leave their children? It seemed unthinkable. "No," she said firmly. "I won't leave Emma and Jack. They need us." Ethan nodded in agreement. "There has to be another way. We can't abandon our kids, not when they're still in the hospital." Detective Martinez sighed, clearly having anticipated this response. "I understand your concerns, but please understand the severity of the situation. These people are dangerous, and they're desperate. We can arrange for you to have secure, monitored visits with your children, but for their safety as well as yours, we need to move you to a safe location." The next few hours were a blur of activity. Sarah and Ethan were whisked away to a nondescript safe house on the outskirts of the city. As they settled into the sparse but secure apartment, the reality of their situation began to sink in. "How did it come to this?" Sarah whispered, staring out the window at the unfamiliar neighborhood. "We were just trying to do the right thing, and now we're hiding like criminals." Ethan wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. "We did do the right thing, Sarah. And we'll get through this. We have to, for Emma and Jack." Days passed in a haze of worry and frustration. Their visits to the hospital were brief and heavily guarded, leaving Sarah and Ethan feeling disconnected from their children's progress. Claire was brought into protective custody as well, her knowledge of Victor's operations making her a potential target. It was during one of these tense days that Ethan received a call from his father. Robert Callaway had been working tirelessly to cooperate with the investigation and salvage what he could of the company's reputation. Son Robert's voice was grave. "I've just received some disturbing information. It seems Victor had contingency plans in place in case his schemes were ever exposed. He's hidden away evidence that could implicate not just himself, but several high-ranking officials in various companies and even in the government." But Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of evidence? documents, recordings, all sorts of damning material. He's using it as leverage, threatening to expose everyone if he goes down. That's why these associates of his are so desperate to silence you and Sarah. You're the key witnesses that could unravel everything. As Ethan relayed this information to Sarah and the detectives assigned to their case, a plan began to form. If they could locate and secure this evidence, they could not only ensure Victor's conviction, but also expose the full extent of the corruption. "I think I might know where Victor would hide something like that," Claire spoke up, her eyes bright with realization. "There was a warehouse off the books that I stumbled across in some old financial records. It never made sense in the context of the company's operations, but if Victor was using it as a personal storage facility." Detective Martinez nodded, her expression determined. "It's worth checking out. But we'll need to move carefully. If Victor's associates get wind of what we're doing, they might try to destroy the evidence. Or worse." The plan they formulated was risky, but it was their best chance at ending this nightmare once and for all. Sarah and Ethan would act as bait, making it appear as though they were attempting to flee protective custody. This would draw out Victor's associates, allowing the police to track them back to their base of operations. Meanwhile, Claire would work with a team of detectives to locate and secure the warehouse and its contents. It was a dangerous gambit, one that put all of them at risk, but the potential payoff was too great to ignore. As they prepared to put their plan into action, Sarah found herself standing in the twins' hospital room, drinking in the sight of her children. Emma, still small but growing stronger every day, and Jack, now robust enough to be held without a tangle of wires and tubes. "I promise you," she whispered, gently stroking Emma's cheek, "we're going to make this right. You'll grow up in a world where people like Victor can't hurt others for their own gain. No matter what happens, know that you're Dad and I love you more than anything." The next 48 hours were a whirlwind of tension and carefully orchestrated moves. Sarah and Ethan made their escape, hearts pounding as they drove through the city, knowing they were being watched and followed. Claire and the detective team moved on the warehouse, working quickly and quietly to secure what they hoped would be the key to unraveling Victor's web of corruption. It all came to a head in an abandoned auto plant on the outskirts of Detroit. Sarah and Ethan found themselves cornered, facing down several of Victor's associates, men with cold eyes and colder intentions. Just as it seemed their plan might have backfired catastrophically, the police burst in, led by Detective Martinez. The ensuing chaos was a blur of shouted commands, sudden movements, and the sharp crack of gunfire. Sarah felt Ethan pull her down behind a rusted piece of machinery, shielding her with his body as bullets whizzed overhead. When the dust settled and the last of Victor's men had been subdued, Sarah and Ethan emerged, shaken but unharmed. As they were led out of the building, Detective Martinez approached, her face split by a triumphant grin. "We got them," she announced, "and better yet, Claire and the team secured the evidence from the warehouse. It's over." The magnitude of what they had accomplished took time to sink in. In the days that followed, as Sarah and Ethan were finally able to return to some semblance of normal life, the full extent of Victor's corruption came to light. Government officials were indicted, corporate executives were exposed, and Victor himself faced a litany of charges that ensured he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. For Sarah and Ethan, the end of the investigation meant they could finally focus on what mattered most: their family. Emma was eventually deemed strong enough to leave the hospital, joining her brother at home. As Sarah watched Ethan gently place Emma in her crib for the first time, she felt a wave of emotion wash over her. "We did it," she whispered, leaning into Ethan's embrace. "We made it through." Ethan kissed the top of her head, his voice thick with emotion. "We did more than that, Sarah. We changed things, made the world a little bit better for our kids." As they stood there, watching their children sleep peacefully, Sarah reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this point. From a chance meeting in a garage to uncovering a massive conspiracy, from the fear and uncertainty of premature birth to the joy of bringing their babies home, it had been a roller coaster of emotions and challenges. But through it all, their love had grown stronger, tempered by adversity and strengthened by shared purpose. They had not only built a family but had forged bonds that extended beyond blood, encompassing Claire, the detectives who had become friends, and even some of Ethan's colleagues at Callaway Automotive who had stood by them through the investigation. In the quiet of the nursery, with the soft sounds of their children's breathing filling the air, Sarah felt a profound sense of peace and possibility. Whatever the future held, she knew they would face it together, as a family united by love, courage, and an unwavering commitment to doing what was right. As dawn broke over Detroit, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Sarah and Ethan stood by the nursery window, their arms around each other, ready to embrace the new day and all the promise it held. They had weathered the storm, emerged stronger, and now, finally, they could look forward to the bright future they had fought so hard to secure for themselves and their children. As the dust settled from the dramatic events at the abandoned auto plant, Sarah and Ethan found themselves thrust into a new whirlwind of activity. The evidence secured from Victor's secret warehouse had opened a Pandora's box of corruption that reached far beyond Callaway Automotive. Government officials, corporate executives, and even members of law enforcement were implicated in a web of fraud and deceit that had been years in the making. While the authorities worked tirelessly to untangle the complex network of illegal activities, Sarah and Ethan focused on their family and the challenges that lay ahead. Emma's recovery was progressing well, but she still required frequent checkups and specialized care. Jack, though healthy, demanded constant attention, as all newborns do. The couple found themselves navigating the exhausting yet rewarding world of new parenthood while still dealing with the aftermath of their ordeal. It was during one of Emma's follow-up appointments that Sarah received an unexpected call from Detective Martinez. Sarah, the detective's voice was tense. "We need you and Ethan to come down to the station immediately. There's been a development in the case." Sarah felt a knot form in her stomach. What kind of development? Is everything okay? "It's best if we discuss this in person," Martinez replied, her tone guarded. "I promise we'll explain everything when you get here." After arranging for Claire to watch the twins, Sarah and Ethan rushed to the police station, their minds racing with possibilities. Had Victor escaped? Were there new threats against them? Nothing could have prepared them for what they were about to learn. As they were ushered into a conference room, they found Detective Martinez waiting with a man they didn't recognize. The stranger's face was weathered, his eyes carrying a weight of sorrow and regret that immediately put Sarah on edge. "Sarah," Ethan Martinez began, her voice uncharacteristically gentle, "this is Thomas Donovan. He's your father, Sarah." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Sarah felt Ethan's hand grip hers tightly as she stared at the man before her, searching for any trace of familiarity in his features. "My father," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Thomas Donovan cleared his throat, his eyes never leaving Sarah's face. "I know this must be a shock," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I've spent years trying to find you and Claire. When I heard about the Callaway case on the news, saw your name, I knew I had to come forward." As the initial shock began to wear off, Sarah felt a surge of anger rise within her. "Years," she spat, her voice trembling. "You abandoned us, left us to fend for ourselves, and now you just show up and expect. What?" Thomas flinched at her words but didn't look away. "I deserve your anger, Sarah. What I did, leaving you and Claire. It's the greatest regret of my life. But I'm here now because there's something you need to know. Something that ties into the case you've been involved with." Detective Martinez leaned forward, her expression serious. "Mr. Donovan has provided us with information that sheds new light on the extent of Victor Hartley's operations. It seems the corruption goes back further than we thought. And Well, it involves your mother, Sarah. Sarah felt as though the air had been sucked out of the room. My mother? What are you talking about? Thomas took a deep breath before launching into a story that left Sarah and Ethan reeling. He spoke of Sarah's mother, Elizabeth, a brilliant engineer who had worked for a predecessor company to Callaway Automotive. She had discovered irregularities in the company's safety protocols, cutbacks that were putting lives at risk for the sake of profit. Elizabeth was determined to expose the truth, Thomas explained, his voice heavy with old pain. But the people involved, they were powerful, dangerous. They threatened us, threatened you girls, we thought. We thought if we disappeared, if we gave you up, you'd be safer. As Thomas continued his tale, a picture emerged of a decades-long conspiracy, one that had shaped the automotive industry and had tendrils reaching into the highest levels of government. Victor Hartley, it seemed, had merely been continuing a tradition of corruption that had been established long before his time. Your mother, Thomas said, his eyes meeting Sarah's, she never stopped fighting. Even after we left you, she kept gathering evidence, building a case. But then she disappeared. I've spent the last 20 years trying to find her, trying to finish what she started. Sarah's mind was reeling. The mother she had never known, the father she had resented for so long, suddenly they were real people, with a history that was inextricably linked to her own recent experiences. She felt Ethan's arm around her shoulders, a steady presence grounding her as she tried to process this flood of information. Detective Martinez took over, explaining how Thomas's information corroborated and expanded upon the evidence they had already gathered. This goes deeper than we ever imagined, she said, her voice grim. But with Mr. Donovan's testimony and the documents he's provided, we have a real chance at exposing the full scope of the corruption. As the implications of this new information sank in, Sarah found herself torn between a multitude of conflicting emotions. Anger at her parents for abandoning her, grief for the mother she had never known, determination to see justice done, and a strange, unexpected flicker of hope that perhaps, after all these years, she might finally understand her own history. Ethan, sensing her turmoil, spoke up. What happens now, he asked, looking between Thomas and Detective Martinez. How do we proceed with this new information? Martinez sighed, running a hand through her hair. We'll need to reopen parts of the investigation, conduct new interviews, and we'll need your help again, both of you. Your experiences, combined with Mr. Donovan's testimony, could be crucial in building this case. Sarah felt a moment of panic. They had just started to rebuild their lives, to focus on their family. The thought of diving back into the dangerous world of corporate espionage and legal battles was daunting. But as she looked at Thomas, saw the years of pain and determination etched on his face, she knew she couldn't walk away. We'll do it, she said softly, squeezing Ethan's hand. For my mother, for the truth. We'll see this through to the end. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Sarah and Ethan found themselves once again at the center of a complex investigation, this time armed with the knowledge and experience of their previous ordeal. They worked closely with Thomas, piecing together the puzzle of Elizabeth's research and the far-reaching implications of her discoveries. As they delved deeper into the past, Sarah found herself developing a tentative relationship with the father she had never known. Thomas, for his part, was eager to make amends, to be a part of Sarah's life and to know his grandchildren. It was a delicate dance of reconciliation, fraught with old hurts and new hopes. The investigation took them down paths they could never have anticipated. They uncovered a network of corruption that spanned decades, implicating not just automotive companies but also regulatory agencies, politicians, and even some members of law enforcement. The scope of the fraud was staggering, as were the lengths to which those involved had gone to keep it hidden. Through it all, Sarah and Ethan leaned on each other, drawing strength from their love and their shared commitment to justice. They found unexpected allies in Claire, who used her financial expertise to unravel complex money trails, and in Robert Callaway, who threw the full weight of his influence behind their efforts to clean up the industry. As the case built and arrests were made, Sarah couldn't help but think of her mother. Elizabeth's fight for truth and safety had cost her everything, including her family. But in a twist of fate, it was that very fight that had brought Sarah to this point, allowing her to finish what her mother had started. One evening, as they sat in their living room, surrounded by case files, and with the soft sounds of the twins sleeping nearby, Ethan turned to Sarah with a thoughtful expression. "You know," he said softly, "your mother would be proud of you, of what you've accomplished, of the person you've become." Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes. "I wish I could have known her," she whispered, told her that her sacrifice wasn't in vain. Ethan pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "In a way you have known her. Her courage, her determination to do what's right, that's all a part of you, Sarah. And now, it's a part of our children too." As they held each other, Sarah felt a sense of peace wash over her. The road ahead was still long, the fight far from over. But for the first time in her life, she felt truly connected to her past, to her present, and to the future she and Ethan were building together. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as a family bound by love, truth, and the unshakable belief that justice was worth fighting for. The culmination of the expanded investigation into the automotive industry's corruption came to a head on a crisp autumn morning. Sarah and Ethan, along with Thomas Donovan and a team of federal agents, stood outside the imposing glass facade of the Detroit Federal Courthouse. The air was thick with anticipation as reporters jostled for position, their cameras trained on the small group that had become the face of one of the biggest corporate scandals in recent history. As they climbed the steps, Sarah felt a mixture of emotions swirling within her. Relief that the long months of investigation were finally coming to an end, anxiety about the outcome of the trial, and a deep-seated determination to see justice served. Ethan's hand found hers, giving it a reassuring squeeze as they pushed through the heavy doors and into the bustling courthouse. The trial that followed was a media sensation. Day after day, Sarah, Ethan, and Thomas took the stand, laying out the intricate web of corruption that had ensnared the automotive industry for decades. They spoke of falsified safety reports, of corners cut at the expense of human lives, of bribes and threats that had kept the truth hidden for so long. Victor Hartley, looking haggard and defeated, sat at the defense table, his eyes never meeting those of his accusers. As the prosecution presented its case, bolstered by the mountain of evidence Sarah and her allies had gathered, a palpable sense of shock rippled through the courtroom. The scope of the fraud was staggering, implicating not just Callaway Automotive but several other major car manufacturers, parts suppliers, and even government regulatory agencies. On the final day of the trial, as the jury filed in to deliver their verdict, Sarah found herself holding her breath. The forewoman stood, her voice clear and steady, as she read out the litany of charges. On the count of fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of racketeering, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of endangering public safety, we find the defendant guilty. The list went on, each guilty verdict another nail in the coffin of Victor Hartley's corrupt empire. When it was over, Sarah felt a wave of emotion wash over her. Tears streamed down her face as she turned to Ethan, burying her face in his chest as the courtroom erupted into a cacophony of voices. Outside, as they faced the sea of reporters clamoring for statements, Sarah felt a sense of closure settling over her. "Today justice has been served," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil of emotions inside her. "But this isn't just about punishing those responsible. It's about ensuring that nothing like this can ever happen again. It's about making our roads safer, about holding corporations accountable, and about honoring the memory of those who fought to expose the truth people like my mother." Elizabeth Donovan. In the days that followed, as the dust began to settle, Sarah and Ethan found themselves facing a new challenge: rebuilding Callaway Automotive from the ground up. With Victor and his co-conspirators behind bars, the company was in shambles, its reputation in tatters. But where others saw ruin, Ethan saw opportunity. "We have a chance to do things differently," he explained to the board of directors, his voice passionate and determined. "To build a company that prioritizes safety and integrity above all else. To become a model for what the automotive industry should be." It was an uphill battle, but one that Ethan and Sarah were prepared to fight. They worked tirelessly, implementing new safety protocols, fostering a culture of transparency, and rebuilding trust with both employees and consumers. Sarah's practical knowledge as a mechanic proved invaluable, helping to bridge the gap between the corporate offices and the factory floor. As Callaway Automotive slowly began to regain its footing, Sarah and Ethan turned their attention to broader issues within the industry. They established the Donovan Foundation, named in honor of Sarah's mother, dedicated to promoting automotive safety and corporate accountability. Through the foundation, they funded research into safer vehicle designs, supported whistleblowers in the industry, and advocated for stricter regulatory oversight. Their efforts did not go unnoticed. Other companies, seeing the positive response to Callaway Automotive's reforms, began to follow suit. Slowly but surely, a shift began to take place in the industry, with safety and ethical practices becoming paramount. Amidst the whirlwind of professional challenges, Sarah and Ethan never lost sight of what mattered most: their family. Emma and Jack, now toddlers, were a constant source of joy and grounding. The couple made a conscious effort to balance their work with family time, determined to be present for every milestone in their children's lives. It was during a rare quiet evening at home, as Sarah watched Ethan reading a bedtime story to the twins, that she felt a sudden wave of emotion wash over her. The journey that had brought them to this point had been fraught with danger and uncertainty, but it had also led to a life richer and more fulfilling than she could have ever imagined. "Penny for your thoughts?" Ethan asked softly, noticing her pensive expression as he gently closed the storybook. Sarah smiled, moving to join him on the couch. "I was just thinking about how far we've come. A few years ago, I was just a mechanic struggling to make ends meet. Now..." Ethan wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "Now you're a hero, a mother, and the driving force behind changing an entire industry for the better." Sarah chuckled, shaking her head. "We did it together, Ethan. I couldn't have done any of this without you." As they sat there, enjoying a moment of peace in their busy lives, Sarah's thoughts drifted to her parents. The pain of their absence had never fully faded, but it had been tempered by understanding and forgiveness. Thomas had become a regular presence in their lives, doting on his grandchildren and working alongside Sarah and Ethan at the Donovan Foundation. And though Elizabeth was gone, Sarah felt her mother's spirit in every safety improvement, every life saved by their work. The sound of the doorbell interrupted their quiet moment. Exchanging curious glances, Ethan went to answer it while Sarah checked on the sleeping twins. She was surprised to hear Ethan call her name, an odd note in his voice. As Sarah entered the living room, she froze in her tracks. Standing in the doorway, looking older and more careworn than Sarah remembered, was Mike, the twins' biological father. Mike, Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. "What are you doing here?" Mike shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting between Sarah and Ethan. I saw you on the news. The trial, everything you've done." I realized how much I've missed, how much I've let you down. I know I have no right to be here, but I needed to see you, to see the kids, to try to make things right." For a moment, Sarah was transported back to that day in the garage when Mike had first returned, to the anger and hurt she had felt then. But as she looked at him now, she felt something different. Not forgiveness, exactly, but a kind of understanding. Ethan moved to stand beside Sarah, his presence a solid, comforting warmth at her side. "Why don't you come in, Mike?" he said, his voice calm and measured. "I think we have a lot to talk about." As Mike stepped into their home, Sarah felt a complex mix of emotions. There was anxiety about what this might mean for their family dynamic, concern about how it would affect the twins. But there was also a small spark of hope. Hope that perhaps this was a chance for healing, for the twins to know their biological father, for old wounds to finally close. The conversation that followed was long and at times difficult. Mike spoke of his struggles with addiction, of the fear and shame that had driven him away when Sarah first told him she was pregnant. He talked about the work he had done to get clean, to become someone worthy of being in his children's lives. Sarah and Ethan listened, asked questions, and shared their own experiences of the past few years. They spoke of the challenges of raising twins, of the joy and exhaustion that came with parenthood. As the night wore on, a tentative plan began to form. Mike would be introduced to the twins gradually, first as a family friend, then, if all went well, as a part of their extended family. As Mike prepared to leave, promising to return for a planned meeting with the twins, Sarah felt a sense of completion. This unexpected reunion was the final piece of a puzzle she hadn't even realized was incomplete. The family, unconventional as it might be, was whole. Later that night, as Sarah and Ethan lay in bed, processing the events of the evening, Ethan turned to her with a thoughtful expression. "You know," he said softly, "a few years ago I never would have imagined my life turning out like this. A ready-made family, a company to rebuild, a chance to make a real difference in the world. It's more than I ever dreamed of." Sarah smiled, snuggling closer to him. "It's funny how life works out, isn't it? All those challenges, all those moments when we thought everything was falling apart. They were just leading us here to this." As they drifted off to sleep, Sarah's mind wandered over the journey that had brought them to this point. From that first meeting in the garage to the courtroom drama, from the fear and uncertainty of the twins' premature birth to the joy of watching them grow. Every step, every struggle had shaped them, strengthening their bond and leading them to a life filled with purpose and love. The road ahead was still uncertain. There would be challenges in integrating Mike into their lives, in continuing their work to reform the automotive industry, in raising their children to be kind, ethical individuals in a complex world. But as Sarah listened to the soft breathing of her family around her, she felt ready to face whatever came next. They had weathered storms before, and they would do so again together. In the quiet of the night, with the moonlight streaming through the window, Sarah made a silent promise. To her children, to Ethan, to the memory of her mother, and to herself. A promise to never stop fighting for what was right, to always strive to make the world a little bit better, and to cherish the love and family she had found along the way. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Sarah's last conscious thought was one of gratitude, for the twists of fate that had brought her here, for the strength she had found within herself, and for the love that had blossomed in the most unexpected of circumstances. Whatever the future held, she knew they would face it as they had faced everything else together, with courage, integrity, and an unwavering commitment to each other and to making a difference in the world. Life's journey is rarely a straight path. It's filled with unexpected turns, heartbreaking lows, and soaring highs. Sarah and Ethan's story reminds us that even in our darkest moments, hope can bloom. Remember Sarah, abandoned as a child, fighting against all odds to build a life for herself. Remember Ethan, trapped in a world of privilege, but yearning for genuine connection. Their paths crossed by chance, but their bond was forged through adversity, trust, and unwavering support for each other. Think of little Emma and Jack, fighting for their lives from the moment they entered this world, their tiny hands, their fragile breaths, a testament to the strength of the human spirit. And think of Sarah and Ethan, standing vigil by their incubators, pouring all their love and hope into those precious lives. Life threw challenge after challenge at them: corporate corruption, family secrets, threats to their lives. But with each obstacle, their love grew stronger, their resolve more unshakable. They didn't just survive, they thrived, transforming their pain into purpose, their fears into fuel for change. And what about forgiveness? The courage it took for Sarah to open her heart to the father who abandoned her, to see the humanity in Mike's struggle and offer him a chance at redemption. It's a reminder that healing is possible, that it's never too late to mend broken bonds. This story isn't just about exposing corruption or rebuilding a company. It's about the family we're born into and the family we choose. It's about finding strength we never knew we had, about standing up for what's right even when it seems impossible. So, when life knocks you down, when the road ahead seems too daunting, remember Sarah and Ethan. Remember that love can bloom in the most unlikely places, that our past doesn't define our future, and that with courage and compassion, we can overcome anything. Your story isn't over. Your challenges, your pain, your struggles, they're shaping you, preparing you for something greater. Like Sarah and Ethan, you have the power to turn your trials into triumph, your setbacks into stepping stones. In the end, it's not about the destination, but the journey. It's about the lives we touch, the changes we make, and the love we share along the way. So embrace your story with all its imperfections and unexpected twists. Because in those very imperfections, in those struggles and triumphs, lies the beautiful, unique masterpiece that is your life. Dear friends, if Sarah and Ethan's journey has touched your heart as deeply as it has touched ours, we invite you to become part of our storytelling family. By subscribing to our channel, you'll ensure you never miss another tale of triumph over adversity, of love conquering all odds. Remember how Sarah and Ethan's strength came from supporting each other? Your support means just as much to us. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. It's a small gesture, but it tells us that these stories matter, that they're making a difference. And just as Sarah and Ethan's story didn't end with a single chapter, neither does our journey together. If you're eager to hear what happens next, if you're curious about the challenges that await our beloved characters, let us know in the comments. Your enthusiasm is our fuel, pushing us to craft even more compelling narratives. But sharing is caring, as they say. If you know someone who could use a little inspiration, who needs a reminder that hope can bloom even in the darkest times, why not share this video with them? You never know how a story might impact someone's life. Lastly, we'd love to hear from you. What aspects of the story touched you the most? What themes would you like to see explored in future videos? Your comments not only guide our creative process, but also create a community of storytellers and listeners, all united by the power of a well-told tale. Remember, every subscription, every like, every share, and every comment is a vote of confidence in the power of storytelling. It's your way of saying that these stories matter, that they make a difference. So join us on this journey. Let's explore the depths of human emotion and resilience together, one story at a time. Thank you for being part of our storytelling family. We can't wait to embark on the next adventure with you.